Stephen, the trials have just opened here in Halifax behind me. What's your general impression here on the first day of what's going to be a long journey across the country?
Well, I think it's great. You know, you have to start somewhere, and I've recognized a few players, and that's good. And also, there's a lot of players that I've never seen in Halifax anyway before. So I'm really excited to see what's going to come out of this.
I went over the roster of players with you yesterday. You had actually picked out a few guys that you knew. Some players walking up to the trials today, you pulled them aside and said, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here." Some surprise with who's here today?
Yeah, there are a couple of players that obviously I recognize them from when I worked with them at a youth level. They're here for the tryout. At that time, they were very good players, and I've seen some of them in the senior league. So I'm kind of glad to see them here because they certainly have the potential to catch the eye.
You met with all the coaches last night. You guys kind of giving your general impressions of what's going to take place here. What do you think is going to come out of these? How many players do you think can be identified to potentially join HFX Wanderers or other CPL clubs?
I can't really answer that truthfully, but what I can say is I do know from tryouts that there are always surprises. There are always players that come out of it. And then when you put them in the second stage, probably against more balanced competition, is when you really can make decisions on those players.
Montreal next week. What are your reactions to wrapping up here at our first trials in Halifax and then looking forward to the next stop?
Well, obviously it was very encouraging. We saw some talented players, and I think they raised the bar, which is good. Now, we don't know how high that bar is realistically because we have 6 more to go. But it would be nice to see in Montreal, my hometown, that we have players that are just as comparable as what we saw here and maybe even higher than that. So it's a matter of going into that situation let's put it this way, the unknown. We don't know. And we're just looking to unearth these talented players, and hopefully we'll have players that match the players that we saw that we believe have a shot at playing in this league. And then we have more players in Montreal and Toronto and Hamilton, and the list goes on and on.
There's no promises here. This is really just an identification camp. But the ultimate goal for this league is to get some players out of these trials and hopefully get them into a camp setting. How realistic is that just from this first group?
I think it's very realistic. I think if you were to speak to every single one of the coaches that are here, they will tell you that there are some players that will be invited to the camp or should be invited to the camp coming down the road. But we have to analyze all of the players that are going to come to these tryouts throughout the nation. And then once we sit down and we analyze that, we're going to make an assertive decision in terms of who's going to be there. And these players will get to know that decision very shortly.
You look for different qualities in players, potentially to play in different positions. You're always looking for that special player that brings something a little bit different. And do they impact the game in the way they play? Because the teams are not going to be prepared collectively. They're just going to be. So you're looking for individual qualities that they can bring to potentially a team. You should be relaxed and you should try to bring your qualities, what you're good at, into the game. But a lot of the time, coaches are just looking to see if you can do the simple things effectively and make good decisions. I think players can come from anywhere, and that's one of the beauties about our sport. But of course, in the places that have the bigger populations, you'll probably more than average find more players there. But for me, and personally, I like a very dynamic type of play. So I want to look for wide players that can excite, that can penetrate, that can make a difference. The league primarily is to help players or to give players the opportunity, the hope to move on into a professional environment and learn to be a professional and develop that way. And a big part of that is if you can have some experienced presence around them that can show them what it takes to be a professional, both off the field and on the field. There's a group of characters. There's no doubt about that. But they all are professionals. They all take the business very seriously, and we will compete. There's no doubt about that. But it will be a healthy respect. But I'm interested to see what Jimmy does, because probably he was always. He would have discussions and you would say, yeah, he's on the ball, but I never expected him to really go into coaching. And then I heard he was working with the young players at the TFC, and I thought that was just fantastic because he has so much experience. And of course, Rob Gale, I've seen work, and he brings something completely different. And Tommy, they all have unique qualities, and I think it's going to be healthy for the development of the players in the league. I mean, it has its traditions. Its traditions has been seafaring, and that takes a certain mindset, and that has been a big part of Halifax, and of course the Atlantic in general. But it's always been a strong community. The game has grown tremendously since 1990, when the Clippers. So you have anticipation and excitement that on one hand, youngsters have something to look forward to, a shirt to support, a color to support, a team to support, and on the other hand, you have the older heads that are very happy that on Saturday now they can go see a game and cheer a team on or jeer a team on, depending on how they're doing. And I think that's important. Funnily enough, when I went into coaching, I was still in university, and I just wanted to give back something to the young players in Halifax, and it just grew from there. And I got really interested in player development, more so not so much from team perspective, but from individual perspective, trying to improve the quality of individuals and how they approach the game, etc. Players are individuals. You have to have some compassion. They sometimes we forget they have lives outside of football and families, and they have all the problems that we have. And I've always tried as much as possible to make players feel as comfortable and allow them to go out there and express themselves within the framework of what we're trying to do, and try to be as open as possible and I don't know if it's the right word, as fatherly as possible with the players. Well, there's no doubt that each one of us can want to win. That's the nature of the business. But I think the way North American sport is designed, you would like to get into the playoffs. And it'll be successful if we get into the playoffs and have a really good run. But that being said, I also, in the back of my mind, always want my teams to play in a certain way. And sometimes, I know in professional sports it's not really necessary, but if I could see the process falling in place and the results come in at the same time, I think that would be very successful to build upon.
Halifax, I think, set the bar pretty high. I think from talking to the coaches today and you, Montreal's definitely raised it already. Can you just talk a little bit about what you've seen early days here on day one?
To be here in Montreal, I know normally Montreal has gifted players, and to come here and see what we have right now and to compare it to the players in Halifax, the bar has been risen a little bit higher as well, early days, so I'm very excited about it.
When you look across the field right now, we've only been here for half the first day, but in Halifax you had pinpointed a few guys that you thought maybe could play at a CPL level. Early on here, how many guys are you looking forward to seeing play on day two, or can you even put a number to it right now?
It's hard to put a number, but I can say honestly that we have quite a few players that I think will impress. Not only have they impressed here early, I think when we get to see them 11v11, where you're exposed, you cannot hide. I think we're going to be really, really impressed with the kind of level of play that we have and players that we have.
What's been the most surprising part of Montreal so far for you today?
It's a combination of all. The young talent that we have, the interest that we've been getting from people from all over, and look at this weather too. It's beautiful. So we couldn't ask for a better day, better turnout, and I'm just looking forward to the remainder of the day and tomorrow as well. Try and make sure before the end of the day that some of you guys get the chance to play in the position that you feel more comfortable in, because I believe in that. You guys have earned that today, being in the last group.
Jimmy, wrapping up the final session here in Montreal, what'd you think from what you saw this week?
It is a hotbed. I don't know about the best, but it is a hotbed. I mean, we were very surprised. And, it was great to see the amount of talent that's here in Montreal. We knew there was going to be some fantastic players that would show up today. Montreal's always produced some great players and technical players, and they were on showcase today. And we were very pleased with the performance of all the players that came out today. It's great to see. It's going to get more and more difficult for us to make these selections. But as coaches, that's what you want. You want to be put in a situation where you're going, okay, you know what? We've got a number of players here, and let's get the players going to suit our style of play.
Alex, not too far from where you once played.
Yes, great memory. Great group of kids out here, players, and I'm excited to be back to what I call my second home.
You have your winter coat on. It's raining now, a lot different than in Halifax and Quebec. How has maybe the conditions affected the play that we saw in Quebec, where the weather was nice? Here, it's pretty slick out there.
Not much. I think when you're a good player, you adapt. And I think we've seen that with these players. They've come out and played. They've not let the weather affect their efforts and their ability to go out and show what they're capable of doing.
The ball's slipping around a lot. The ball's zipping along the surface. Do you learn who the technical players are when you're playing on a surface like this?
Definitely. I mean, it's a good way of gauging their talent, especially how slick the surface is. But to be honest, these boys have adapted quite nicely, and I'm very pleased with their performance to this point.
I always ask you this question. We were in Halifax. You compared Halifax to Quebec. Can you just, through the first day here, compare Quebec to what we're seeing today in Hamilton?
Very comparable with the talent. So we're very fortunate. We're seeing some talented players. We saw it in Halifax. We saw it obviously in Montreal, and we're seeing it here in Hamilton.
Once again, the big game coming up on day two. Is this what the coaches look forward to, just getting out where the space is big and seeing who can really play in that 11-a-side game?
Definitely, because you're exposed. You cannot hide. You cannot hide in an 11v11 setting. You get to see the players that are focused and playing the game the right way in terms of when they don't have the ball and when they do have the ball with their decision making.
Tommy, talking to a few of the coaches during this process, they've mentioned that Steeltown has some defenders with steel. Have you noticed the defenders here, maybe compared to other places we've been? How is the fullbacks, the center backs, how have they impressed you?
Good. I mean, big, strong boys. So I think that's something you're going to need in this league. You're going to need, we all want to be able to build out the back, but first and foremost, they're defenders because they have to stop goals. I've been impressed with that. Something that's caught my eye actually is the number of left-sided players. I think that's a rarity when I go on my travels across here. Is left-sided players that can influence your outcome. So if you're a left-sided centre back, you've got more options to come out with the ball. Left backs, crossing, you can push on. So that's something I'm looking as we go into the final game. That's what I'm looking to see.
I ask Alex this usually at the conclusion of every trial. We were in Halifax, then Quebec, then now Hamilton. Can you just compare and contrast each of these stops so far? The level at each one, is one better than the other? What do you think of just these first three stops?
Well, I think we weren't sure what to expect when we arrived in Halifax, and I think once we filtered through, the good players started to come through, the golden nuggets we said. So once they were there and we were able to provide a list of 5 to 10 players that we felt were there or thereabouts that could be invited into training camps. And then as we went to Montreal, Martin Nash, obviously my assistant, he came and he was quietly impressed. Once you got through the chaos of the first day, the quality started to come through, and Montreal's known for having some really good talented players, and they lived up to that. So when we've got to here, I think we've got a caliber that Montreal raised the bar, and I think there's this is going to make for a really good final game.
What are you, 16, and to crack a goal like that?